The forests of Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Productive, diverse, professionally managed, but it wasn't always that way. For 3 centuries, Americans methodically cut forests for farming or for fuel. But in the late 1800s, the Industrial Revolution's unprecedented demand for wood drew the lumber and pulp and paper industries to the high quality and diverse southern forests. By the early 1900s, forests throughout the South were heavily cut over. From the coast to the mountains, lumber barons had transformed the land. Eventually, much of the original forest area of the 3 states had been cleared. Farmers had worked the land until it lost its fertility, and lumbermen left behind fields of stumps. Circumstances had to change, and change they did. In 1892, Frederick Law Olmsted, working at the Biltmore Estate in western North Carolina, hired a trained forester named Gifford Pinchot. Pinchot implemented a management plan that improved the forest while returning a profit to the landowner, the first plan of its kind in America. The work there became a national showcase for what good forestry could look like. In 1898, Pinchot's successor, Carl Schenck, opened the country's first forestry school on the Biltmore Estate. The school produced many of the first foresters to work in the South. That same year, Pinchot was named the chief of what would become the U.S. Forest Service. In 1900, he founded the Society of American Foresters to provide a professional forum for the exchange of ideas and research. In the years that followed, national and state governments passed forest laws that created forest services and other agencies to manage public lands. The continued growth of industrial logging and wildfires brought federal intervention through laws like the Weeks Act of 1911 and an influx of foresters to manage public and private lands. In 1921, the Forest Service created the Appalachian Forest Experiment Station in Asheville, North Carolina. And something else happened in Asheville that year. 8 members of the Society of American Foresters met there to discuss what was happening on the ground and in professional circles across the South. On October 29, 1921, they organized a new SAF section for the 9 states in the Southern Appalachian Mountains region. This section would eventually be called the Appalachian Society of American Foresters, or APSAF. During APSAF's first 15 years, its leaders came mainly from the Appalachian Forest Research Station, Pisgah National Forest, state forestry agencies, and the paper industry. The first chair of APSAF was John S. Holmes. He was appointed North Carolina's first state forester in 1915. Holmes was succeeded by Vern Rhodes, a Biltmore graduate and the first supervisor of the Pisgah National Forest. Next came Earl Frothingham. He was the first researcher and director of Appalachian Forest Experiment Station. After Frothingham came Walter Damtoft, chief forester for the Champion Fiber Company and the South's first industrial forester. Over the next 25 years, as the need for foresters in the South grew, so did APSAF. The end of World War II brought a huge increase in APSAF's membership for several reasons. Returning veterans from small towns and rural areas in the South graduated from forestry schools. These new foresters were native to the region, understood local customs, spoke with a local accent, and could promote forestry to private forest owners. The new foresters were needed because, once again, America was looking to the South's forest for its wood and pulp supplies. The post-war prosperity brought a boom in demand for wood, for housing, and everything that goes in a house. Researchers responded and began to publish more across a wider range of forestry. To meet demand, forest industry was expanding, acquiring more forest land, and placing more emphasis on intensive forestry. Government and university research was complemented by technology from university cooperatives and some company forestry programs. State forestry agencies, consulting foresters, and some company programs began to extend forestry assistance actively to individual forest owners. This growth in the number of foresters in the state government, forest industry, and consulting forestry provided a much larger membership base for APSAF, a broader basis for leadership, and the foundation for a much more robust array of topics for SAF meetings. Membership grew to the point that APSAF couldn't meet the needs of all in the region. Due to its growth, new sections had spun off from APSAF over the years. In 1947, APSAF region became Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina that we still comprise today. Over the next 30 years, the changes that came to APSAF reflected what was happening in the profession as a whole. Beginning in the 1960s, as women and minorities entered professional forestry in larger numbers, they also entered the ranks of its proud professional organization.
I opted to go to Texas A&M. I and another lady, we were the first two women to get our undergraduate degrees in Texas A&M.
We set up task teams to address opportunities for increase in minorities. We work with faculty members and have a team that works to address grant writing and opportunities to help look at ways that they can do more research, but also preparing them for the industry. I started working with industry leaders to share our stories and ask for their support and resources. Finally, we included our development and advancement team in our fundraising planning efforts.
They brought with them different perspectives and voices, and eventually they entered leadership positions. Pat Straka from Clemson was the first woman to serve as an APSAF officer, followed in APSAF chair positions more recently by Jennifer Gagnon, Ann Jewell, and Susan Gwynn. Liz Bourgeois served as Secretary-Treasurer for 8 years, followed by Ginger Riley for 5. In addition, Pat was the first woman to serve as District 8 representative to the SAF board, later followed by Joanne Meyer Cox, Krista Rogers, and Ann Jewell. From APSAF's ranks have come 6 national SAF presidents: Clarence Corsten, David William Smith, Joanne Cox, Fred Cubbage, Gene Kodama, and Sam Cook. Philip Wakely, an early forester in the South, noticed that in 1924 there were fewer than 20 professionally trained foresters south of the Mason-Dixon line, and 9 of them worked for Southern and Appalachian forest experiment stations. Today, APSAF has nearly 1,000 members. As APSAF enters its 2nd century, it faces a totally different situation from its early beginnings in Asheville. Forestry is well established. Forest technology is advanced, and good forestry is widely practiced on federal, state, company, and individual lands.
And there's a lot more focus now on what the forest can contribute to the global warming issue and what wood can contribute as carbon sinks.
Today you'll find APSAF members from a large variety of backgrounds working in fields like natural resource management, research education, and extension forestry.
Our profession is so rich with is it the diversity of backgrounds and people and ethnicities, and that it's people that you can count on. And that's just inherent to me as part of the profession.
APSAF members don't just help clients and the public. You'll also find members doing service projects and helping one another out in times of need, such as after a hurricane, wildfire, or during a pandemic. For 100 years, members of the Appalachian Society of American Foresters have been managing and protecting the forests of Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. As we celebrate them for the forests that we enjoy today, we must remember that it will be our efforts and those of our successors that will keep those forests verdant for the generations to come.
Well, I think forestry is a wonderful, wonderful experience